If you look at not only wine industry, but if you look at industries, the products or the brands or the companies that make it, or rather have longevity, are the ones that show focus and they know exactly where the company needs to be in 25 years from now. If you're in it for a quick buck, it becomes more of survival rather than I know what I'm building towards.
Wine should be that.
Why would you make a product that should actually be able to mature in a bottle for 25 years, but you're in it for the cash?
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, about to have a conversation with Heinrich Venter from South Africa. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting. I need you to have a listen to a couple of shows. One, I want you to go back and find the episode with my father, Paul Callum Carrion Sr. I had a chance to sit down with him before he passed a couple of years ago to understand, A, how he came up with this idea for just direct-to-consumer wine in America, and two, his sort of a career as an immigrant from Cairo, entrepreneur by trade, pharmacist, but the love of wine brought him to wine shop, and this created the direct-to-consumer market in America, which is an amazing conversation. As well, since we're in South Africa today, I want you to hear May Eliane Lankesong of Glenelly Winery in Cape Town. She was alive and watched the Nazis shoot up her parents' chateau in Pichon-Longueville in Bordeaux. I didn't even ask any questions. She just started talking and had this amazing conversation about the history of wine and her history and why she ended up in South Africa, but not why we're here. Welcome to the show, Heinrich.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
You guys are on some kind of whirlwind American tour. What's going on?
Yeah, we're visiting with our importer, Cape Classics. We're visiting the West Coast, doing a little bit of a road trip with some of the boys from South Africa and trying to get South African wines into a couple more glasses.
Well, you know, I came out to the lobby and there's like a not barrage, but I met with 5 or 6 guys. Yeah. You guys just having a grand old time.
All looking like they're on a wine holiday.
But a long haul to get here.
30 odd hours.
Yeah. That's hard to do.
It is the time adjustment is a bit heavy.
So why? What's the point? Why you go through this headache?
Oh, why not? Why not come to the US?
Hey, I'm supposed to ask the questions. Okay. No,
no, man. It's I think the US market for South African wine has always been very exciting. For wine in general, the global wine market. There's so much influence here. I don't know if people realize how long South African wine has actually been in the US.
By the way, your winery is Kanonkop. Kanonkop.
Means
say that earlier.
Cannon Hill.
Kanonkop.
Yeah.
Cannon Hills. Yes, U.S., of course, is one of the most important wine markets in the world and has been cutting edge in many technologies and or just appellations and importation. It was kind of interesting because you guys were talking about earlier that how New York, the East Coast, has generally way more imports wines than the Southern California does.
Yeah. I think also because you have so much local wine being produced here.
Yeah, for sure.
On this side. So
but it's a problem right now. We're long. I mean, they're talking about pulling out 150,000 acres of vines in California. Is there a problem with production in South Africa?
I think, Paul, you might. It's not only California.
Yeah.
It's really in every major wine-producing country in the world, I think. You know, there are news articles coming out. Some are panicking, you know, others with the head on their shoulders are just saying, you know, ship will get through the waters. But
I think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I think wine's not something that, will be produced for 6,000 years and then all of a sudden, tomorrow we're
You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I've been saying that forever, but I think the public needs to know, the listeners, it's an agricultural product, so you can't throttle back production like you can a widget if you're overstocked or inventory's piled up. I mean, you pick it and you crush it, and if things change in the market, you have to do something.
But also, and the interesting example about the widget, things that are fads.
That's true.
Come and go. And if you put yourself in the same pool as a fad, some fads become medium to long term and then kind of fizzle. Some just flash in the pan overnight.
Did you guys have the pet rock in South Africa where the guy was selling rocks in a little box and people were giving him his gifts?
People have sold anything. I just opened a fridge down at a cafe. And it was craft water.
Yes.
I didn't know that existed.
Oh,
I thought water was water.
There are water psalms.
Yeah, well,
you can get a water psalm.
That I've seen. Yeah,
that one I haven't figured out. Frankly. But let's talk about that for a second, the fad part of this, because that's an important part of my pet peeve, or one of my pet peeves in this industry. You've got packaging fads, you've got style fads, you've got alcohol content fads, you have flavor profile fads.
Yeah.
How do you weather that?
If you look at not only wine industry, but if you look at industries, The ones that, or the products or the brands or the companies that make it, or rather have longevity, are the ones that show focus and they know exactly what where the company needs to be in 25 years from now. So focus. If you're in it for, or it becomes more of survival.
Yeah.
Rather than, I know what I'm building towards.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a really good point, because wine should be that.
Exactly. Make a product that should actually be able to mature in a bottle for 25 years. But you're in it for the cash.
Well, you got to sell some. Everybody knows you got to sell some.
Of course, but short-term goals.
The reason I brought it up is that where you're sitting now, I've had many entrepreneurs sit. They've been mostly packaging entrepreneurs. And you just made me think of something. I've never had anybody sit here and say, yeah, I'm crafting this wine because I've seen this void in the marketplace and I think we need a wine that is expressive of something. Let's just say, Napa Valley, as colloquial as that might sound. But they sit and they say, I think we needed a wine that comes in a self-serve bottle, or I think we needed a wine that comes in a can, or I think we needed a wine. And clearly, the motivation for those kinds of products is I want to build it up, get as many placements as I can, sell it to a wholesaler or distributor, and move on with my life. And that bothers me in wine. It doesn't bother me as a business. We all want to make money and be the person that made that product happen. But when it comes to wine,
it's not about the wine, right? It's not what you actually then put into that vessel.
Yes, that's the problem.
It becomes about the vessel.
And they always say this is fine wine or gourmet wine or next tier wine, in a different package. And I open them and it's like, they're not. So are those kinds of trends in South Africa? Do we have? It's a younger industry in general, right?
More than 360 years?
Well, that's a good question. Is it New World or Old World? Are we talking about wines that have been around forever and the technology?
I think it's a
knowledge base.
I think it's an old New World, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The first vineyards in Australia came from South Africa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
At South Africa, as brand South Africa, maybe it's not your industry.
Yeah.
But Napoleon drank South African wine.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never read that in a book.
Vin de Constance, the sweet wine, very famous sweet wine, was Napoleon's table wine.
Oh, wow.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you come to America, what do you hear? You're doing this obviously to make people aware, and this is a tough road to hoe in general, just because it's a hand sell almost. When you sit in front of a group of people, like don't you have an event tonight or something you're doing?
Yeah, we've got an event with our local distributor.
Okay, so you're gonna go to this event, you're gonna meet some people. What do they tell you? What's the number one comment they make?
Well, I think it's not really comment, but I think if I could make another observation is that people are asking questions. It's a thirst for knowledge about South African wine. So, you get people who really, they want to delve deeper into what makes South African wine. What is it that's the fiber, And I think that's a very important mindset to have, really, is when you want to start exploring something that's maybe new to you in a lot of ways. You want to start asking more questions rather than have too much perception,
That's true.
of what South Africa is or what it isn't.
So what do you tell them? I'm going to come. Let's say I come tonight. What am I going to hear?
Well, I think you're going to taste some brilliant wine.
Well, okay, we'll start with that.
That's a given. I think as a South African industry, the one big thing I think we're all really on board with is that South Africa, the wines coming out of South Africa really is of a world class. We win international trophies that I think people know about, and in wine circles people might say, oh, okay, great. Just showing that the wines are on exactly the same stage as, what you would think a good wine.
I mean, I totally agree with that. Where you guys were sitting earlier today, a total of 35 years every Tuesday, and tasted from 9 to 2 in the afternoon every day.
Brilliant.
If I wasn't, it was all by accident, really, vacation or sick, that I was doing that. And it amassed to a lot of wine. Not that much South African, and I probably count on one hand how many South Africans I featured in the club. But I see some countries that ebbs and flows, like Australia. Sometimes it's everywhere. And then 10 years later, it's only yellowtail. And then 10 years after that, it's everywhere. And there's been a very volatile cycle. South Africa's been a very steady cycle. Is that from a volume standpoint, an awareness standpoint, or we're still getting our foundations built?
Well, I think it's also a matter of access, right? We're quite far away. The whole world went through a couple of years now where the whole logistical system of the world has been impacted in a big way.
It's a freaking wreck.
It's terrible. So, and if that's not enough, if you don't have a virus shaking up the world, you've got a couple of wars going on.
Well, that was good for me, though. I sold a ton of wine during COVID. But
so if you had a good strategy, then I think you could have sold a lot of wine.
Right. we sold. It was so bizarre during COVID because my sweet spot, we're going to talk about your wines here, it was $15 to $20. I've always, all my wines for $15. I had a higher end clubs, but they weren't nearly the membership wasn't nearly as high as in my main club, which was $15.99, I think, a bottle. During COVID, though, they were buying anything I put in front of them. So Austin Hope, which is a well-known Paso Robles blend, which is $60 a bottle or so, I sold 100 cases of it during COVID.
Brilliant.
I sold 5 bottles the month after. Came as 1 liter bottles, which was a restaurant-only sale originally. I was selling for $140 a bottle, and I couldn't keep my $18 bottles a week in stock until they ran out of 1 liters.
Yeah.
And then again, when COVID was over, I didn't sell any. I still have 8 cases here, none, because concept changed. And so I wonder how that applies to the general scope of wine. You're the export manager, sales manager for the brand. You come to America and you hear these comments. Are they saying, where do I find this stuff? No one's ever told me about it. I go to the wine shop. They don't know what I'm talking about.
I think sometimes you might run into difficulty when it comes to shelf space, for sure. Any retailer, and you can't blame them, they have a certain amount of real estate, and they want to make the real estate sweat. So,
well,
it needs to work. So they're going to sell the wines that move off the shelf the quickest.
Right.
And I think it's just, for us as South Africans, it's the matter of engaging and answering those questions that are being asked. Being able to tell the stories, tell people about the winemaking philosophies. I think we've got some of the most amazing terroir and sites in the western tip of the southern tip of Africa.
The idea of coming has already been sold to me, and
I
talk about May Allian here soon, but
just watch out for that 30-hour flight time.
Yeah, that's brutal. It's not me. I'll do it. It's my wife I got to convince. And she doesn't listen to the show, so I can say that. Do you have in South Africa the segmentation of the marketplace where you have this consumer style wine, which is in America is a slightly sweeter version of everything? So you go down to the supermarket. If you go to a supermarket while you're here in Southern California, you'll see that whether you're in Ralph's, Vaughn's, or Safeway, or Kroger, it's the same stuff. Through the whole shelf of Cabernet is the style the same. It's the consumer style. Do you have a consumer style in South Africa?
I think in certain product segments, yes. There is, for example, if you start looking at sweet bag-in-box, or you want to generalize with Perle Rosé, things that
So there's some things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think those products definitely have a place in the market.
Yeah.
Those products generally draw people into the wine market.
Yeah.
It's like with big whiskey brands. They've got you have the whiskey that gets appreciated,
Yes,
and
eventually. Right.
Exactly.
It's a good point.
But they need that one that is more affordable, that can just be grabbed, without worrying about breaking the bank. That is how you make people start to love the product. If you ask them, what do you drink? I'm a wine guy. That's what you want, right?
Well, yeah, I guess you're right, because talking about this earlier with your other group, when we were on Amazon for a long time, what a wonderful marketplace to go sell wine on, because it's billions of eyes. And we only sold the most well-known brand in America, or one of them, which is called Stella Rosa, which is a sparkling Moscato. It's sweet. It's like 8% alcohol. It's nothing. Yeah. It's a huge brand. And it's right here in Southern California. And so I thought, wow, that's interesting, because those people are just looking to buy something they know. They don't want to go down the market to go to Target or something and buy a Moscato. So they just get online. And they were paying me $2 more a bottle than they could buy it for locally, but it was just the convenience of it. Those people were not looking for something interesting to taste.
No.
They're not shopping at this point.
So if you look at wine shelves in general, and this is something that I think is it's not a problem in South Africa only. It's perhaps much broader than that. But people get so intimidated when they stand in front of a shelf. Normally you grab the first thing that you know, or that you've seen, or that you've tasted with a mate, and you go to the till. You know what it tastes like, so I'm comfortable with it.
Right.
And I think that's, coming back to your earlier point, that's where a lot of people exploit the shell, the packaging.
Right.
We have a lot of labels out there, but how many wine brands do we actually have?
That's true. I think somebody did the other day. 85% of the wines you see at the market are sold from 4 companies.
Yeah.
Constellation, Treasury.
Exactly.
That kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, I mean, how do we combat that? And I think you made a really good point. I think throughout the history of wine, contemporary wine in a contemporary world, there's been that entry-level thing that we like to do. And in my dad's case, it was White Zinfandel.
Yeah.
That's 1974, Bob Trincaro. Now it's 19 Crimes and Cali Red and Martha Stewart Chardonnay, those kinds of wines. And I think what's interesting to me is that eventually the palate, they get tired of that.
Yeah. Question really is how to convert that initial, I almost want to say endorsed, product, how to convert that into somebody going to a wine rack and saying, oh, you know what, I want to try something new today. I want to explore a bit. I had this it was my first experience of wine because personality out there, I read they endorse it or they own it or they say I must drink it. And that's a great way to get people.
This is a live story that happened to you? Or he's talking about this, concept of this?
Well, I mean, I started, going to say this on a podcast, but I started my wine drinking journey with sweet rosé, and from there, went on to 1.5 liter bottles.
Yes. Oh, well, we got to get bang for the buck there. Bang for the rhyme.
It was more about volume.
Yeah, right.
But then from there, when you get exposure to actually, somebody telling you, listen, stop worrying about the price and the packaging and the other intrinsics, just the fluff, really. Mm-hmm. How about starting to explore wine, even if it's at that entry-level price point? Try something different. Try something, see whether you can hone your preference rather than sticking to one thing, getting bored and moving on.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's an interesting problem. Yeah, you said it. Since you're in the marketing side, if I get bored with Cali Red, which is easy to do, I'm bored with some of the biggest brands in Napa. And so now I got to find something else. Well, somebody has to kind of tell me it should be the next step. And I used to have a wine buyer here when I had the wine shop. Well, I thought I had the best palate and best buyer in Southern California because you could tell him what you usually drink and he could take you to the next step in his head. And he would take you to the part of our store that had that wine, that next level of complexity, the next level of dryness to make the wine interesting. But that then works backwards to what you guys do. In other words, if I need to have a store owner or a department manager show me my South African red because it's the next step, then that wine has to be the next step, which has to come from the vineyard from you guys, and you have to know what that next step is. I mean, how do you keep your ear to the ground?
I think getting back to what I said earlier, wine estate like Kanonkop, it has always been about the focus. Mm-hmm. If you fall around every 5 years and you change your style and you try and adapt to what the market is doing, you're never going to have any consistency. So you're going to find that somebody is going to buy your wine, they're going to like it the 1 year, and now all of a sudden the next year your style is completely different to what they like. Where are you actually keeping your consumers?
Really
where are you building your brand equity?
Yeah.
So
that's a really interesting point because I had a Bordeaux maker here, Lagrange, Fourth Growth, and he works they're owned by Suntory, the big Japanese company, but he's given complete autonomy to what he makes. He's not required to listen to the marketplace. He's required to make the best that he can make from what he's given. Absolutely. And the best meaning, I think, most indicative of what that part of Bordeaux offers.
Absolutely.
What a refreshing attitude.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that consistency is what the consumer is going to finally land on.
Yeah. It sounds very typical, the Japanese style, really.
Yeah, right.
How many Japanese companies have been in business for
that's true.
Centuries.
Long time, right.
But, getting back to mindset and that philosophy, I think a very interesting time where the wine industry was a bag, the bag's being shaken.
Yeah, right.
At the moment.
That's a good point.
And maybe some things are going to fall out, and there are going to be opportunity, I think, industry as a whole. But through consistency, you are going to avoid being one of those that are being shaken too hard.
I agree with that. There's a lot of market forces against what you're doing.
Yeah.
The term that's been going around the internet that bothers me the most, LinkedIn and all those services, is innovation. And I'm trying to think, what does innovation mean in the wine world? Wine, it's the same product it was 6,000 years ago. And we've refined the character, but it's always been about there's two opposing arguments here. That's always been about what the soil delivers to me and my representation of what that terroir was at the time it was, meaning that wine should be a sense of time and place. But then there's this other concept that the consumers have always driven the need for wine. You go back to Veuve Clicquot, and she made a Russian version and she made an English version. So we have to listen to the consumer sometime to sell stuff.
Of course.
And then there's this philosophy that I read in a Burgundy book, an old Burgundy book, where when they were appellating parts of Burgundy in the 30s, I think it was 32 or 38 or something. And one of the winemakers said, well, it should be part of our appellation that you cannot advertise, because if I build a better product, they'll beat a path to my door. It's like, of course, he was completely like, no, we're not doing that. Oh, no, absolutely no, absolutely no.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act for you guys, because here you are on a tour of America trying to get people to taste, but you're not going to succumb to the market forces of consumerism.
No, I think you're kind of screaming for attention a bit.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, I can also do the whole innovation act, or I can also do this. Or whereas if you just show, listen, this is what we're doing, and we're doing it damn well.
There's a lot of pride in the South African wines that I've sensed so far.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. It's not only me.
Well, they're great. I mean, they're really good. And because I spent so much time tasting, that I wish there was a solution to turn a lot of people onto the South African brand quickly. And there just isn't. You're doing it now.
That's the way I think that we need to do it. You can't expect a lot of South Africans to get here. It is obviously it's hard to get here. Mm-hmm. Being here is absolutely fantastic. I think the American public and the South African public in a lot of ways are very similar.
Very similar.
Very similar. And we can really relate with each other on a very personal level. I think we've got a lot of the same interests. We've got a lot of the same tastes when it comes to not only wine, but food, sport, outdoors, different facets of life that we both have in our respective countries. That is so dear to our hearts. The thing for us is, how do we share what we love with the American public? We can honestly say we love being here.
Yeah, right.
Because we feel so at home.
It's an interesting thought. I didn't put it that way, but there is a certain camaraderie that seems natural between Americans and South Africans.
Yeah.
I just asked your compadres here if they knew Peter Koff, Koff. He's a South African importer of wine here. He's semi-retired now, but he's also a master of wine, one of the few South African master of wines. Yes. He did it a long time ago. Yeah. And he's a very good friend of mine. Bought a lot of wine from him early on. I was calling him to find out how to get to Cape Town because I wanted to go see Napoleon.
Yeah.
And I just chatted. But that same camaraderie turned around, and he goes, by the way, since I have you on the phone, I'm having a very difficult time selling wine on the internet right now.
Yeah.
I said, I'd be happy to take a look at it.
Yeah.
And it's a very comfortable relationship.
Yeah.
Way more comfortable than one I would have with a Frenchman or an Italian because it seems the outlook of life.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think for us as South Africans, that particular facet of American life, because we can relate with it, we speak so easily about our wines and what is so special about it, the terroir, and because those things are also what you guys give a lot of value to.
Right.
So it's easy to understand when we actually start having that conversation.
What are your biggest markets for your brand?
Look, I think
South Africa is
South Africa. We're quite a well-known brand in South Africa, and internationally we've done very well in the traditionally strong South African markets. The US is one of our top markets as well. Okay. Yeah, and generally the European market has been very, very strong for South Africa because a lot of European tourists visit South Africa very often because it's on the same time zone.
Well, May Eliant, she's from Bordeaux. She started a winery at 70 years old.
Yeah. Which
is fascinating to me. Tell people how old I am, but that'd be 5 years from now, me saying I want to start a winery, which I would never do. I would never do it because I've seen too many failures, too many people getting the wrong reason, or the amount of capital it takes just to even think about selling anything and the time it takes to do that. How did your winery get started?
Well, we're fourth generation.
How do you say it again?
Kanonkop.
Kanonkop. And spell it for the listeners. Kanonkop. Kanonkop. Okay.
So we're a fourth generation wine estate.
Oh, well, that's probably pretty old.
Some very, very old wine estates in South Africa. Some even 8th, 9th generation.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we've been well established. Last year we did our 50th harvest, and 2 brothers that currently run the estate, they really have been at the forefront, I think, quality red wines in South Africa for a long time, and specifically Cabernet and Pinotage. Again, I'm going to come back to that focus of main varietals being Cabernet and Pinotage. We do have a little bit of other Bordeaux varietals, the Merlot, the Cab Franc and Petit on the farm as well. But Cabernet and Pinotage are our main focus points.
So generational, that's an interesting point. European generations are normal. Even with restaurants in France, particularly, they get handed down, they get managed again the next generation. America is not like that. My wife's cousin has a restaurant 30 years. That's like an anomaly, and he has no heirs. So there's no generations there. Just generations in the wine and food business in South Africa, a normal thing, or is it sort of a...
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times, obviously, your agricultural land when it changes hands, it is from generation. Sometimes economic conditions makes that hard. And also, it's something special. It's something you kind of want to hold on to. And every time you see a generation kind of, the family, the old family, leave a piece of land, there is this kind of, oh, man.
That's brutal. This picture behind you, my father, 1975, and
oh, brilliant!
I had no business. I had no idea.
You were a handsome man.
My surfer days. Yeah, thank you. The idea then, I had no business. I had no idea I was going to do this. I was just working for him at the time. And in '88, he came to me and says, "I'm going to sell to South Africa," which is still around, I think.
Yes, still going.
So they had made him an offer, and he said, well, "Why don't you come check it out and see it?" Okay, that's not the point. That was business. Right. So businesses are a little different. Here, generationally, you have land and you have a stewardship of that land that probably has a little more poignancy to handing it to the next generation. When I was done with this, March of last year, my wife and I were like, we would never wish our business currently at the time on our kids. We wouldn't want them to have the headwinds that we were about to get into, because it was very difficult here on the internet, et cetera. So it was a foregone conclusion. We weren't going to have one of the kids. I had one child that probably would have been very good at it, and her husband as well. But we saw nothing but headwinds. There was nothing of ethereal value to hand somebody, because it was just business. And here you are with land, vines, philosophy, right? There's a philosophy behind all that. Yeah. That makes it attractive.
And coming back to your earlier point about starting a winery at a certain age,
70.
Thank
you. No,
I would ask, what is your why? What is your why? What's your reason?
Yes.
So do you
why I wouldn't do that?
Sorry?
Why I wouldn't do that?
No.
Or why would you do that?
Why would you? What is you are missing something? Is it because you want to start something exciting? Is it about, you want to have a place where you can sit and watch your grapes grow?
Yeah, right.
Is it what is the why? And in terms of handing from one generation, taking over from the next one, is your why true? Is it genuine?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that if a younger man or couple or woman going into Napa Valley and having their first love of the vine and seeing the lifestyle, that is a different motivation than somebody who's 70, who's been in it for all her life. And for her, clearly, and I think she says this in the podcast, she fell in love with South Africa. And she saw what, when I say damage, it would be American colloquialism, what damage she could do, but what love she could bring to the land to produce something special again. Yeah. Having come from Bordeaux.
Have you been to Glenelly?
No, and this is one of I was trying to convince my wife to do it this quarter. That's not happening, but we need to go. Yeah. And we're going to be in the East Coast. Well, we're going to be in Paris in May, and I was trying to figure out a way without her knowing. Again, she doesn't listen to the show, so she'll never hear me say this. Like, how can I just trick her into saying, okay, we're going to jump on a plane and go home, but we actually go to South Africa.
Yeah. She realizes once she sees the check-in,
Yeah, right. Well, what are you doing? Why are we going to Stellenbosch? Only because this connection with Maya Leon, and I don't think I told you. I was telling your friends. We went to Vin Expo in 1993, and we went across the street. We were staying across the street at Chateau Belgrave to have dinner with her, Monsieur Henri Vandervoort, and my wife and I and my dad and my mom. And we walk across the street, and here's this elegant woman in her 60s with a white eyelet dress, and we had this amazing dinner with her. What did I know?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it until I had her grandson sitting here for a podcast. He runs a winery in Spain. And I said, wait a minute, your grandmother is May Eliani, right? I said, was she in Bordeaux in the night? I said, oh my God. I had dinner with her. The amount of passion to be 70 years old and start from scratch.
Wine keeps you young.
It's an amazing thing. You just said that too. At the end of the conversation, which was like an hour and 20 minutes, we were talking about how special wine is. And she goes, look what it did for us. We're friends 30 years later. And I went, wow.
Absolutely.
What other beverage can do that?
That is exactly the point.
Yeah.
Is the fact that me and you, we can sit here and talk about wine probably for hours.
Right.
And, we don't have any, but
yeah,
I would love to.
I actually do too. I do it for a reason, because they go downhill very fast.
Corks start flying.
Yeah, right.
And that is exactly the beauty about wine. What I would love for more people to be able to experience is the fact that you can sit and not only, when you have a bottle of wine, obviously there are the occasions where you have a bottle of wine and it's about the wine, right? But the wine is probably for me the most enticing accompaniment to conversation and food and sharing moments.
It's like, why is that? I mean, you don't have it. There's no answer to this question.
Yeah.
I've asked it of everybody.
Rhetorically.
Is it because it's so soulful? Is it because it's deep into the soil? But why do grapes represent the soil better than peaches and apricots? We don't sit around the table after, guava nectar, or strawberry wine.
Maybe that's the next the next fad.
But you don't.
Yeah.
You don't do it with a glass of whiskey. I mean, whiskey aficionados will sit around and talk about the character of the whiskey, but not like wine. And I'm not talking about like this smells like cedar and blueberries and blackberry. I'm talking about that. I'm just talking about the expression it brings to the table.
I think, wine is one of the oldest beverages. If we just look at it as a beverage, one of the oldest, in the book that's been made thousands of years. But I think it's also one of the only, if not the only one, that is really produced by Mother Nature instead of by man.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And that is why terroir is such a huge part of wine. And coming back again, when you start talking about packaging and all the things that I can do, the guy who decides what cork to use or what label to use or what bottle, I'm not making that product.
Yeah, right.
Me and the winemaker, we need to do as little as possible.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Nature is much more powerful than we are.
Just get out of the way, will you?
Exactly. Just do what you need to do in the cellar. Right.
So is there any Kanonkop? Is there any conversation of alternate packaging? I think, and I had this conversation earlier. The sustainability, I think, is of all the industries of all the world, that sustainability is probably the most appropriate in the wine trade. I think it's more accessible that way. But what movements are you guys remaining focused, which I think is a very important thing? And in lieu of that, varietally, stylistically, packaging, any movement coming from you guys?
If we talk sustainability, for example, there are many different types of sustainability, right? Some people see it as you need to go organic. Some people focus on financial sustainability.
That's
probably a very important one. How do you define sustainability? And what will be sustainable for us over the next 50 to 100 years?
Yeah.
And for Kanonkop, we need to sustain the wine philosophy at Kanonkop.
Well, that's a really interesting thought.
And a lot of times, in different industries, and it happens in business, I think, every day, when it starts becoming again about the people rather than the philosophy behind the product that you are making, then you have opinions coming in, and this is what I want to do, and this is my way of thinking. And at the end of the day, you don't buy into the bigger picture, right? And
that's an interesting thought.
And at Kanonkop, rather, everybody buys into the philosophy. And that's very important for us.
I think you have the advantage because it's generational change. In other words, that philosophy trickles down naturally. Plus, you stay focused, and so the thing that doesn't waver is the wine, and people come and go as long as they get the same.
Yeah.
And that's the stewardship. That's the concept of stewardship to the land and the value of the grape, and not the marketplace.
Yeah. So, for example, Kanonkop has only ever had 3 winemakers.
Wow.
Yeah. In a 50-year span.
That's amazing.
The winemakers have really, and they're all still alive, and the wine quality, and today's winemaker, Aubrey Beerslaar, he would tell you that a lot of the terroir and the grapes that he's getting into the cellar, the groundwork was laid by our first winemaker, Jan Boland Coetzee, who prepared the vineyards in the correct way. And after him was Beyer Streeter, who was, today is known as the Prince of Pinotage.
Yeah.
And then Aubrey came, and the philosophy stayed exactly the same from day one until where we are now.
I've always asked that question of winemakers when they've been handed off by, let's just talk about Frederic Barnier. He's at Louis Jadot right now, and he was handed it to by, I can't remember the name, but he was the guru of Burgundy forever. And I always wondered for a young winemaker to come in and be handed that responsibility to carry on this tradition without screwing it up. I mean, you can screw it up.
Exactly. They say, it's very, very easy to make bad wine from good grapes, and it is very hard to make good wine from bad grapes.
Right. Yes.
So the terroir is so important. But Aubrey, our current winemaker, joined Kanonkop when he was 28.
Wow.
Yeah.
So isn't that sort of the irony of the wine business? Because here you are the sales manager, you're here in America, you've traveled a long way to talk to people one at a time almost, and then there's the farmer and the steward of the land who doesn't really care about what you're doing, except that it pays his salary. But at some point, it's like not my problem anymore. You have to go sell what I produced. And it seems to be, too, at some point, opposing philosophies or approaches to the industry. Because there's a guy that I had on the show, and he gone to Burgundy and done something amazing. An American who went to Burgundy, was able to buy land, and he produced wine, and he got out of it eventually. It proved to be very hard. The love of the farming part was great, but the part of getting it on the street and selling it was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
We're already out of time almost, but go ahead.
No, well, I think the wine production side and the wine selling side, again, philosophy and the Kanonkop brand is much bigger than Heinrich.
Right.
And at the end of the day, all I can do is I can be a vessel. Been going on for way longer before I was even a thought.
Right, yeah.
So that for me is just the nice part. It's
humbling, isn't that?
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And how many people and how many visionaries have been part of this and kind of gotten the product and the wine estate to where it is today. All I'm doing is I'm taking baton, or part of the baton, and really just bringing it to the US.
Where can I get Kanonkop in Southern California? Do you know? Retail? Is there retail stores? Are you going to see one tonight? I think you're going to Vendome tonight, right?
Yeah, we're going to Vendome. Yeah.
So which city?
I'm not exactly
Because there's
sure.
one down the street, but I don't think it's the one you're going to.
Yeah. Look, I think the Kanonkop brand you'll find if you
look for it.
Go and search for it. We are, I think, in a couple of retailers. I'm not exactly exactly
I'll
sure.
ask Madeleine.
Yeah.
Fascinating chat, and love to hear your philosophy. This is great.
Thank
I
you
hope we
so
can do
much,
it
Paul.
again sometime. Next time you come to SoCal.
Well, first you must come and visit us.
That I'm going to do.
Treat your wife and come.
2 conversations or 3 by the end. I'm going to have 4 by the end of the week.
Yeah.
I think I can convey the romance to my wife to make the trek.
Please do.
Visit and see it. I mean, how beautiful it is, and meeting you guys and your comrades, and knowing Peter well. It must be a bucket list wine thing. And now because she's older, I really want to sit with her and hear more.
And I think it's really amazing what she's with Glenelly in Stellenbosch. It really is it's a beautiful,
Well,
cellar, and the wine range is fantastic, and it just shows, if you want to do something, if you've got a passion, if you've got a why.
That's the why. I like that.
That's the why.
That was a great word.
And
call it that.
Yeah, then it's, you guys always talk about a land of opportunity in the US, and I think opportunity is one thing we're not short of in South Africa.
Well, you got my why stimulated, because we're going to come down and check it out. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Same. Thanks, Paul.
And hear about what's going on in Kanonkop and
Appreciate it.
In general in Washington. I wish you good luck and safe travels the rest of this.
Thank you very much.
Thing, and keep that charm up, and
appreciate it.
Get these people tasting some great South Africans.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, man. Cheers.